Hello, good evening. I just noticed I didn't change my slide, so we're not lesson 9 and we're not talking about submit yourself to God, but we can redo a lesson, I guess. Yeah. We're actually on lesson 11 and we're talking about the title today is Blessings in Patience and Not Wealth. We're getting close to the finishing up the series. This is actually my last time for the series, and we're Devo next week for Thanksgiving, and Joel will finish us off in 2 weeks. I have learned some things about myself through teaching the class, and one thing I've learned is that my ear is not normal shaped, because this microphone, it takes like 3 times to get it on every time, so just non-related, but interesting fact that what I've learned. So tonight we're in chapter 5 of James. Today, like I said, the lesson is blessings and patience, not wealth. Kind of a hard topic, I think, to talk about because we all deal with wealth or money or the going after money more than we should. Money, wealth, riches. So hopefully we can get through this and learn something, get some applications that we can learn from James. According to many people in the world, maybe even us at times, when you talk about somebody being successful, we talk about money or how much you're making. We think about money flying, like you see, show me the money, or you've heard like cash is king. Or what about even Mattress Mac? He's come up a lot recently. Too bad we didn't turn 10 million into 75 million, right? That would change our life, right? In a good way. Or that's what the world tells us, right? Well, really, in reality, money doesn't do a lot of things that sometimes we think it does. Money doesn't necessarily make us happy, maybe for the short term, but not for the long term. I found a statistic that says 3 out of every 4 people say that they stress about money at least once a month. So 3 out of 4 people, or 75% of people, stress about money monthly. And another study I found says that, kind of small, but at the top, this is people's number one stress in life. And they say 32% of people say that money is their number one stress. So 3 out of 4 people say they stress about money, and 1/3 of people say that's their top stressor. And if you can see, right below money is work at 11%. So people have money, people don't have money, but a lot of people stress about money. You think from seeing these stats, maybe out of 3 out of 4 people that stress about money, you would think that the 1 out of 4 maybe are the super rich people, right? Well, interesting thing that I found about the study is income, net worth, how much money you have saved have nothing to do with whether you stress or not about money. People that are top 5% earners in the world still stress about money, just like people that don't have much money. So this tells us something about money, doesn't it? It doesn't matter how much we have, we always want a little bit more, or that's kind of the way it works. Instead of this, the bigger factor in determining whether people worry or not about money is contentment. We talked about this, I think, a few times during the series, but people that are content don't stress about money. So it really doesn't have anything to do with how much. It's where's our heart? Are we content with what we have or what God has given us? Most people have the desire to have more than they do, or sometimes we even go to the extremes to get more than we have. But why do we do that? Have you ever heard of the company called Theranos? I haven't, but I saw a little story on it. It was a company called Theranos. I guess I'm saying that right. This company was founded in 2003 by Elizabeth Holmes, and she was 19 at the time that she founded the company. She was a Stanford student at the time. Elizabeth, when she was 9 years old, told her family that she was determined to be a billionaire. Not a millionaire, she wanted to be a billionaire. 9 years old. 21 years later, her dream became a reality. And in 2014, she became the world's youngest self-made woman billionaire. She was worth $4.5 billion. 1 year later, though, her company crashed. The technology that she created was false. It wasn't true. Her net worth went from $4 billion to zero, and she was convicted of 4 counts of fraud from her company. She turned the greed and desire for money into evil practices. Wealth can be a very slippery and dangerous slope, can it? In many cases, it doesn't end up how we think it will or how we hope it will. So in our text today, we're in chapter 5. James is very frank when he's talking to some wealthy people. Ones who are looking down on the poor, not treating the poor like they should. They were taking evil measures into their hands to gain their wealth. You know, from the commentary I was looking at, I don't know if we know that he was talking to maybe wealthy Christians or maybe even non-Christians. But I think either way, it doesn't matter. What we can learn from James through this is very applicable to us today. So let's start with the first half of our text today. James 5, 1 through 6. Now listen, you rich people. Weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay your workers who mowed your fields and crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourself in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you. He starts the text off, he says, now listen. I think that, he's saying something important, right? And he's pretty harsh. I think it's important to note, here and throughout the scripture, God does not condemn the rich necessarily for being rich. But he proclaims the worthlessness of wealth, not the worthlessness of the wealthy. Some of God's some of the world's most godly people that we read about in the scriptures had money, had wealth. Some were given wealth by God. We can go a list. I mean, Job, Abraham, Joseph, David, Solomon, we can go on and on. But there were times, such as our text today, when God was very angry at the rich or the ones that had wealth. Look at some of the terms that we just read in our scripture, the things that he said to these people. He called them, you're living earthly, living in luxury, living in self-indulgence, overeating or gluttony, condemned, murdered the innocents, rotted, corroded, failed, making the poor cry. A lot of harsh words. Christ also speaks on this in Matthew 19 when he said, then Jesus said to his disciples, truly I tell you, it is hard for somebody who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and asked, who then can be saved? Jesus looked at them and said, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. we've heard this, I think most of us have heard this many of times, and I like verse 26 here when it says, with man it's impossible, but with God all things are possible, which tells me it's coming kind of from where your heart is. Are you going off yourself, or are you going off of God? So does our actions come from us, from selfishness, from self-indulgence, or did they come from God? Did they come from the Scriptures? Another key thought comes from 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. He says, for the love of money. Does our desire for money come before some of our other priorities? Do we prioritize maybe the thought of money or the gaining of money over God, over church, over friends, over family? Do we sometimes maybe like money more than we should? I think we all struggle with this at times. I found a list of questions, and I thought I would share with you. Is the thought of these questions is this is kind of a self-assessment on whether you're kind of where your mind and heart are at when you're thinking about money. When you read these, do any of these apply to you? Do you ever find yourself often thinking about money or how to make more money? Is money a major topic of conversation between you and your friends? Or plans on how to make more money or spend more money? Do you often compare how much money you make or how many possessions you have? Are you stingy? Do you love spending money or having a thrill from buying expensive things? Or do you scheme for ways to maybe make more money, have a promotion? Are we guilty of any of these, or do we think like this occasionally? I think sometimes we do. I don't think in and of itself, maybe they're not always wrong things to think, but I think it is a good self-assessment to look in the mirror and see where our heart's at when we talk about wealth or money or how we think about money. From our text, James mentions several reasons why desiring money is wrong. My last class, which I forgot to change on the first slide, is do we desire God? So this is kind of on that. Do we desire God or we desire money? And James gives us reasons why it's wrong to desire money. The first thing that jumps out to me is it's temporary. In our text, God says that wealth will rot, garments are moth-eaten, and gold and silver will corrode. So I think the first thing that really jumps out is it's temporary. While we are on earth, money is never guaranteed, even when you have it. I gave you a story about Elizabeth Holmes, who cheated to make her money and lost it. But, we can think about, say, Bertie Madoff. He lied to get his money, right? And he didn't just take himself down. He took a lot of people down with him. Or this week, I've heard a lot about a man named Sam Bankman-Fried. I guess I'm saying that right. The guy who lost 80% of his money from cryptocurrency. It's temporary. You can lose money quickly by bad investments, maybe lose your job or your income stream, bad financial advice. They say 60% of NBA players go broke after 5 years from leaving the league. So money can come, money can go, but it's temporary. Think about when Christ returns, all the material things we have lose 100% of its value. It's temporary. The next thing we can learn from James here is he says wealth is corrupted. James says it will serve as a witness against you. As their wealth corrodes, it will eat their flesh like fire. Eat their flesh like fire. So not only you might lose your money, but it's going to hurt when you lose your money. Almost if it's better to not have the money in the first place than to have it and then lose it, because it's going to hurt like fire. I heard this story about a child in a classroom, and he raised his hand and asked the teacher, he says, "What is greed?" And the teacher says, "Before I give you the answer, I want you to do something for me when you come to school tomorrow. On the way to school tomorrow, I want you to go to the candy shop or the chocolate shop next door, and I want you to go through the candy shop, and I want you to bring me the best chocolate that you can find in the chocolate shop. But the rule is, you can only walk through the hallway once, and you can't turn around, and you can only get one thing. So I want you to do that tomorrow when you get to school and bring me the biggest chocolate or the best chocolate that you can find." They left for the day. They get back the next day, and the child's there, and the teacher says, "What kind of chocolate did you bring me?" And this child says, "I didn't get anything." And she says, "Why didn't you do that?" And he says, "Well, I couldn't decide, because I always thought that I was going to find something better and bigger as I walked. And then I got to the end, and I never got anything." Kind of a silly story, but it is true. Sometimes we always want something else, or we think something else is better than what we have. Or we're looking for something, but we never find it because we're never content with what we're looking for. Do we ever think like this student? I think we do sometimes, looking for more. I'm not sure this story exactly tells you what greed is, but it's a good lesson not not always be looking for something better than what you already have. Riches is corrupted and might lead to greed. Third thing is, wealth will take a priority, and I put it over everything else. In this passage, they were more worried about storing up the treasure in the last days. Similar to the parable of the rich fool, right? They thought that they were laying up their riches and saving them for later days. As an example today, somebody who stores up for retirement, maybe they die before they actually retire. So it was useless. And I'm not telling you not to save for the future. There's some good things. We got to take care of ourselves and our family. But why are we doing that? Does it come from God, or does it come from things that we want, or things that we need, or things that we think we need? Fourth thing is, wealth will cause evil actions. And I think, it's very similar to number 2. Wealth is corrupted, but it's corrupted and it will also cause you to do evil things. Similar to the various billionaires that we talked about that gained and lost, a lot of them lose them because they were doing evil things. James was angry here at the audience for gaining wealth through wicked means, specifically not paying their workers or withholding their wages and hoarding their wealth at the expense of others. They spend it on themselves with pleasures and luxury. It says fattening themselves like cows for slaughter. They use the power that comes with wealth to oppress others, oppress maybe the just, the Christians in this text. Desiring wealth can make us do evil things. Maybe almost like an addiction when we lie and cheat and step on others just to get what we want. I already read 1 Timothy 6:10, but I'm going to read again, including verse 9, because I like verse 9. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. Desiring money can obviously cause evil actions. So what can we get from this? Wealth can do a lot of bad things, but what applications can we draw from this? We need to be careful about how we obtain our wealth or how we look at wealth. To do so at the expense of others is a sin. There's a good story in Deuteronomy chapter 24 talking about this. It is wrong to think that success can only come from stepping on others. Many people, and I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it, many people became successful or wealthy or do their job by being bullies, taking advantage of others, doing anything they can to get what they want. It is not the riches that are wrong, but it is desire to be rich that is filled with danger. Riches are not necessarily wrong if maybe they're a byproduct of maybe our job, maybe things that we do, but that should not be our goal. Maybe an example was we want to do a certain job, maybe a certain career, only for the financial gains, but rather maybe a raise or a new job because of a hard work or honest work that we do. I think God looks good at that, but it shouldn't be our primary goal. So how do we obtain our wealth? I think if we do it honestly, for a job well done, God is pleased with us. But if we do it by hurting others or doing it through evil measures, we are in danger of God's wrath and the final punishment. So we need to be careful how we use our wealth. Sometimes, specifically here, James has talked about spending on luxurious living when others need help. Exactly what James is talking about here. It could be an indication of our lack of godly desires or lack of love of our God. 1 John 3:17 says, "If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person?" So our heart should be to give and help, not to use it on nice things, luxurious things, when we have the ability to help others. According to the New Testament, the purpose of working and building wealth is not to obtain wealth for ourselves, for our own gratification, but instead to help others. 1 Timothy 6:17 and 19 is another one. "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain or so temporary, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment." God will provide what we need for our enjoyment. So our focus and desire, our priorities need to be on God and helping each other, not for our self-fulfillment. So James talks a lot harshly about wealth and the bad things that come with wealth in the first half of our text. And then he turns around and talks more specifically to the ones that are being talked down to, maybe the poor Christians, maybe the ones who are being oppressed. So let's go on to the second half of our text, and that's starting in verse 7. "Be patient, then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. So he kind of changes his tone a little bit. He talks to the rich, and then he talks to the people who are complaining about the rich. So what does James tell us to do to refrain from the evil that comes from gaining wealth or trying to gain wealth? Or maybe how to deal with the anxiousness we have when we don't think we have enough, or the financial stress that we talked about earlier. Here, James is talking to the ones that feel that they are being oppressed by the rich. But I think, he's talking to the poor, but I think the application can be to any of us. And the main word here that he uses is what? Patience, which is another word I think that we struggle with at times. I think I'm a pretty patient person. I think my wife will tell you that. But even I, at times, have a hard time with patience because it's hard, especially now when we like the instant gratification, right? Being patient. Do you ever feel like somebody is out to get you, or that they are trying to take advantage of you, maybe trying to bully you, like we talked about in the first half, or maybe you're not getting paid fairly for what you're doing, or maybe they're just looking down on you, similar to what these people are feeling. Do we ever feel like that? So what does James tell them to do? Be patient. James gives us a few things actually to do and a few things not to do. And let's start with the first one that we keep talking about is patience. There's actually two different kinds of patience that he talks about. Right here in chapter 12, the Greek word is makrothumia. I'm probably saying that wrong. But this type of patience means long-suffering. So that's what he's talking about here. Patience that's long-suffering. Back in chapter 1, when we were talking about trials and dealing with trials, he actually uses a different kind of patience that's hupomone, which means to bear up under trials. That sort of patience is really, we intend to use it against the things or circumstances. But that's back in chapter 1. Right now, the patience that he's talking about from long suffering is talking about how we deal with people. Maybe in this text, how we're dealing with these people that are oppressing us. Either kind of patience that James talks about, especially here in 5, patience is important. Are we patient with each other? Of course, it's the fruit of the Spirit. The word patience, through several translations, around 70 times it's mentioned in the Bible. So that's a lot of times. So I think that I get from that it's a very valuable and an important word. And in this case, we're talking about patience that's long-suffering. Patience that maybe doesn't come easy. Maybe patience that sometimes will test our endurance. Here, James gives 3 different examples of how people need to be patient. He talks about the farmer being patient for their crops. He talks about the prophets, and then he talks about Job and his perseverance and patience. Each of these examples teach us to place our trust in the Lord. Patience and perseverance will eventually be rewarded for those who trust and are patient with him. Because it also says the Lord is coming soon. Aside from patience, he also says, stand firm. Or another translation, the English Standard says, establish your hearts. Maybe meaning to fix or set in place. Also translated to strengthen. Stand firm, strengthen, establish your hearts. To stand firm or establish one's heart then involves strengthening our hearts in a way, a non-wavering way, create a firm foundation in our Christian values. We got to stand firm in what we believe, in the truth. Here it means to strengthen our heart to a place where we can be patient and resist evil being done. We talked about sometimes wealth creates evil desires. Well, here he's talking to the people that are being oppressed, and he says, be patient and stand in your values, stand in God, and you will be rewarded. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 12 says, so I will always remind you of these things, even though you know them and are firmly established in the truth you now have. You got to stand firm in the truth. Through constant and careful study, through actions, through what we listen to and hear, put through our minds, we have to, spiritual maturity, we said it a lot, we got to let that make ourselves deeply rooted and establish our truth in our God. And then I'm going to mention it. It doesn't really talk about it in our text, but it's actually Joel's lesson in 2 weeks, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot. But he goes right into this, into prayer. But he does say that God heard about the poor through prayer. He heard them through prayer. So I can't not put it in there. I think he talks about prayer a lot. So any time we talk about James, we can throw prayer in there. But I think prayer, use our tool to pray. James then gives two things to not do. The first one, he says, don't grumble. Especially against one another. When others maybe bully us, step on us, it's easy for us to vent our frustrations to others. We are likely to say things maybe that we shouldn't. But I think the lesson is to not lose our patience and take out our frustrations on maybe our brothers or our families, our friends, or even to our enemies, and especially to God. We have to learn to contain ourselves and not to grumble. And then he says, don't swear. I think for some people this is an easy thing to do when you're being treated poorly. But maybe we can also use it to say, don't make quick judgments or rash promises. Be an example of our actions even when things aren't going the way we want them to or the way we prefer. So the things that we learn, James says, be patient, stand firm, establish your hearts in the truth. Don't grumble, don't swear. And I can argue, most important, pray. I think in this world, everybody here, we are very blessed. We are truly blessed. We have a lot of things. We have a lot of material things. We live in a country and society which we have much to be thankful for, but the worldly vision of money is maybe not the way we should think about money. We live in a world where money thrives. We talked about, cash is king, or, here comes the money, or TV shows that you win a bunch of money. You're successful when you have money. But we have to be aware of this. The What the world thinks is not the way we should think. Showing off your material assets is not what we want to set ourselves on. Buying fancy things is not. We live in a world full of materialism, and it's easy to be influenced by the world's values. So hopefully the application here is be mindful of that. What do we think about it? Where are our hearts at? Most of all for us as Christians, we need to think about one thing, and that is we're on earth now, and our riches will go away. They're very temporary. But eventually, we will have all the riches through eternity with our Lord. For the times that we feel that we are being treated unfairly, looked down upon, remember to put your faith in the Lord and be patient. The Lord will take care of us. He gives us everything that we need. Matthew chapter 6, 19 through 21 says, "Do not store up yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Let's end in prayer.